YouTube, Ozick, going the Goat House is back. Power rankings, week 15 power rankings. We update these every single week. This week we got some changes at the tippy top. Well, maybe not number one, but right around there we got some changes. And again, these aren't predictions. Some people do their power rankings like their end of the year predictions. Not here. That's not how we do them. We got Tuesday night weekly picks. We got on Wednesday score predictions. And that's just a small percentage of our videos. So if you're new, please subscribe. Even in the offseason, free agency and NFL draft coverage. So, yeah, give us a try here if you're new. We much appreciate it. Follow that Twitter. If you're not following the Twitter, I don't know what you're doing at this point. You're missing out on a lot of extra content, a lot of NFL talk, talking during every single live game. We have an Instagram, podcast, Patreon, link in the description, comments for anything that you may need. You see underneath me the Sided app. You debate football, just like you do in the comment section here. You earn points, win Amazon gift cards. Pretty cool. We have a page on there. Follow us. There's a link down below, description, comments for that. Real quick, I mentioned that Patreon every single week. We got junior score predictions on there. We got my bets of the week for NFL and college football. Did very well on both of those last week. Updated playoff predictions, a lot more. A lot of you showing your support on there. Appreciate you very much. Power rankings. The Jets, they're still at 32. That didn't change yet a single time this season, and I don't think it's going to change. They got their ass beat to the Seahawks, so as expected. The Jaguars are at 31. Minshew Mania once again, so maybe I do think he's their best quarterback. I don't think there's any question about that. He'd end up being the franchise guy like some fans thought going in this year, though, but I do think he is their best option, so maybe that's a bad thing. Maybe they can beat I don't think they're going to beat the Ravens this week. Maybe they can pull off a win here, and that might be a bad thing, for them. But they remain at 31. Got blown out to the Titans. Bengals remain at 30. If they were fully healthy, I mean, you can say this about a lot of teams, but if they're fully healthy, they're probably better than number 30. That's where they're at. The Panthers down 3 spots, and they kind of end up back in the area where they started going into the year, which is kind of interesting because they really started to show they are a sneaky team. Early in the year they were winning some games, and now they're just extremely disappointing through the stretch that they went on a big losing streak and they ended up putting up a fight with the Chiefs that was within those games. And now they're just kind of going downhill again here. So if they find themselves towards the bottom here, pretty unfortunate for them because there's some winnable games for them throughout the whole year for sure. Cowboys are up 1 spot. Dominant win over the Bengals. Revenge game for Andy Dalton. That's fantastic. It's tough to move them up any further in this, but they are fighters right now. They're fighting for the NFC East. They got a lot of work to do. They do need some help probably. I mean, the other team's losing, NFC East teams. But they are up 1 spot, 28 for now. The Falcons are down 5 spot. Another extremely disappointing team. They're starting to heat up. Yeah, kind of heat up because of their defense. Their defense has been lights out, really. Even in losses, they've been really good. But their offense is so disappointing. They're losing games once again. They should win. The Chargers game, they should win that game. There's really no excuses there. The defense did their part. Defense has been doing their part. This was a team that, hey, maybe they can. I know they got a tough schedule, but the way the defense playing, where they're playing, maybe they can stick around in the hunt here. But a game like that just sucks the life out of them and out of me for them too, because I was starting to believe a little bit for them. Not really anymore. Same was kind of for the Panthers for a bit there, and they just kind of just let you down. The Chargers are up 2 spots, still a bottom tier team right now. They have more talent than being a bottom tier team, but that's just reality right now. That's a pretty good win against the Falcons. Offense hasn't been producing the way it was earlier in the year, but they get a clutch last drive. Herbert, good last drive. Defense, they were playmakers, made some big time plays, so they were playing maybe more like how they should be playing. So they're up 2 spots. Next, we got the Texans down 4 spots. They were starting to climb, but you lose like that to the Bears. The Bears were on a 6-game losing streak, too. Keep in mind, that's a dagger. That's a dagger. That'll get you down. You almost want to move the team further down for losing in that fashion to a team that was on a 6-game losing streak. But it's tough to move them down below some of these other teams. But, yeah, they're down 4. That's going to be it for the season for the Texans, unfortunately. Number 24 is the Lions. They stay put. They put up a good battle against the Packers. Now Stafford's hurt. Very unfortunate, but their season was pretty much over at this point. Tough schedule going forward as well. But yeah, there was no reason that they should move below the teams below them, so they're staying put at 24. The Niners are down 3 spots. Very disappointing game against the Washington football team, who are hot. We'll talk about them in a little bit. But the Washington didn't even do anything on offense, so credit the Niners defense, but it's more of a negative than it is a positive. The team didn't do anything on offense, and you lost the game, a winnable game still, and you had every chance you can get at the end there to try to make something happen, tie the game, whatever. They couldn't do it. So it's a team that we kind of thought could sneak into playoffs. Technically still can, but yeah, they let us down there. I know they're one of the more beat up teams. A lot of teams are hurt though. So you can't just say this is the one team. But if they are fully healthy, it's a pretty darn good team. But they're losing games like this that you can't lose those types of games, in that fashion. So they're down 3 spots to 23. The Bears they finally going to win off their 6-game losing streak. They've been on the negative side, going down every single week in these power rankings for the most part. Now they're heading back in the right direction. A dominant win over the Texans, up 3 spots. Offense putting up some points. They got the Vikings this week. That's a pretty big game for them. So, and the defense looked like it was back on track. The defense was probably the most. Holding Deshaun Watson and company. I know they're missing some guys, but again, a lot of teams are missing guys, including the Bears. Holding them to 7 points. That was extremely impressive. So they're up 3 spots. Let's see if they can stay consistent. Now, can we trust the Bears now? That's kind of the question. For them. But they're up 3 spots, heading in the right direction. 21, the Broncos. It's a pretty big win against the Panthers, excuse me. I think mainly because how many points they put up on the board. It's a really good game for Drew Lock. They're getting KJ Hamler going. That was probably his best game this year. I think definitely was. See the speed for him, big playability. Jerry Jeudy played well. They gave up a little more points I thought they would, but they won the game. They scored 32 points. Pretty damn impressive there. So, is that a bad thing, though? Most likely not, but are they going to be, we can keep the band together. We don't need to fire anybody. We can keep Drew Lock. He's our guy next year. And I don't really, 100% disagree with that all. Like saying, I'm not saying they definitely can't do that, but we've seen it every year from several teams. Could it be a bad thing they could start to believe, and if it's healthy, another team, so many teams are beat up, so you can't just say, only this team's affected, but if they're healthy, they could be a pretty good team the way they sit. But they're up 2 spots, number 21. The Eagles are up 7 spots. Now, this is interesting because they finally won a game, one other game. They won a game, so, and I know they beat the Saints. That's pretty big, too, so that plays a factor, but it's not really just beating the Saints, boosting them up 7 spots. If you watch the game, the Eagles team is talented. That's kind of my takeaway from this game, and it shouldn't really be a surprise. The Eagles team is talented. They made the switch at quarterback. They're obviously much better. Jalen Hurts gave them life. The way Miles Sanders was talking after the game. Miles Sanders played maybe his best game, I think, of his career. Maybe not statistically. I don't know what his best game was statistically. I thought just the way he played, hitting the hole with the vision, making people miss after the fact. I thought he played his best game of his career, young career. The defensive line is legit, and we almost forget those things, while they're losing. Their defensive line is one of the best in football. So this feels like a talented, good team, and it should be the best team in the NFC East, and they play like it against a really good team, a team that was number 2 in the power rankings last week. So all that combined, their talent just says they're much better than the teams below them. And at any given time, those teams can beat them. Some of them did. But to me, their talent says they're much better than those teams. So they got to move up 7 spots to number 20. Let's see if they can keep rolling on that. Let's see if it's not just a 1-week thing. For their case, I hope not, because they have the talent to produce more than just a 1 win like that. I know they have more than 1 win on the year, but you get my point. Number 19, the Giants moved down a spot. Disappointing game against the Cardinals. Couldn't really move them down more than this because look at the resume. Look at what they've been doing recently. They've been heating up. That Seahawks win still means something. That streak they were on still definitely means something. They've been playing pretty good ball. That was pretty sloppy. The offensive line, Daniel Jones, pretty bad game for them. Defense did their part. I know Kyler Murray and the boys scored some points, but and if you just look at the score, it probably doesn't look like the defense played very well. But either they're they've played better recently than that, but it wasn't on them for sure. That's definitely my point there. So I couldn't move them down too much there, but not a good game. They're down number 19. 18's the Patriots. Disappointing loss. I know they played a really good Rams team, but I thought they had a similar matchup like the Niners do against the Rams. So I picked the Rams, but I thought they could stay close, give them some problems with the running game, with the mainly running the clock, but mainly making plays on defense. And they didn't do that. They scored 3 points in that game. They just got embarrassed in that game. And I wasn't happy with either side of the ball. Not even a little. So they're down 4 spots to 18. Kind of an inconsistent team. Big game against the Miami Dolphins this week. 17. The Vikings kind of been 16, 17 in this range. They lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was more of a disappointing game because of the kicking. I think the coaching in the second half, the play calling game plan was good early, pretty bad late. Pass rush couldn't do anything. Offensive line had like a little, while they were on their streak, they were looking like actually good. And I was like kind of wondering what happened to the Vikings offensive line. Like, what have you done with them? Like, where did they go? And now they're getting back to normal. The Jags game, the Buccaneers game, looking like where we expect them. Maybe, the Bengals got, I'd say, the worst offensive line in football. The Vikings might have the second worst. They're down there with them, and that kind of disappeared for a while, and they're kind of getting back on track. But, they were on somewhat of a streak, winning attitude, before that Buccaneers game. So can't punish them too much. But the Buccaneers are a pretty good team too, I suppose. So big game against the Bears. See if they can get back on track. 16, the Raiders. Raiders been disappointing. It's almost a team that you want to move down more because they've been disappointing. They haven't really felt like the same team that they were, in the middle part of the season. But you can't, and I think we've kind of been saying this every week, you can't really move them. They're better than the Vikings. They're better than the Patriots. They're better than the Giants. The Eagles could be better. They just got to show it more. So that's kind of on them to start winning more. But, yeah, couldn't move them down too much, even though I think a lot of us kind of want them to move down more because of their performances, but it's just tough just depending on what's going on around them. You can't really move the Raiders down below them. 15, the Cardinals up 2 spots. Let's see if they can stay consistent now. There was a big statement game against the Giants, a must-need win. Maybe the Hail Mary hangover is past. I actually think it was a legit thing. Offense still, they did their part. They made enough plays. They're still a little sloppy though. Kyler Murray's still a little sloppy with the footwork. They don't seem to be as effective to when they were number one in the offense, earlier in the year, middle part of the season. Defense had a monster game. Can they keep that going? Possibly a trap game against, I think, an improved, sneaky Eagles team this week. So that should be a pretty good game. 15 for the Cardinals for now. Let's see if they can get back on track. They're in the right direction here after last week. Washington football team, number 14. They're up 5 spots. A dominant win for the Niners. Well, I shouldn't say dominant because the offense was very much non-existent, and that's a bad thing there. I know Alex Smith got hurt, got knocked out of the game, so I suppose a legitimate excuse, but they weren't doing much before that anyways. They really had close to nothing on offense. They really did, and that's a negative. But the positive is they still beat a sneaky good Niners team without any offense, and that just shows how good of a team this is, how good of a defense is. Dominant defense. It's getting better every step of the way, which really isn't a surprise. That whole defensive line is very young. It's Rivera's first year coaching this defense. It's a new defense that is very talented. That was a hell of a defensive performance. Ridiculous. They're hot right now. They're hot. They got a big game against Seattle Seahawks this week. We'll talk about them in a little bit. Washington, number 14. Good to see a team, rising up like that. We did not expect to see them at this part here, going into the year. Thinking week 15, Washington will be at 14. I don't know. And I think I was a little higher on them going into the year than most people, but none of us expected this right now. So impressive. Dolphins stay at 13. They did lose to the Chiefs. They put up somewhat of a fight, it's kind of a positive and negative for that game too. They forced turnovers in that game. They actually got some more downplay plays going on offense, explosive plays, I should say. So those are kind of the good things. They look like they have more to them, I guess, against maybe the best team in football. That's positive. They did force 4 turnovers. Again, that's a positive, but you usually should win the game when you force that many turnovers. I guess that shows how good the Chiefs are. But so there is kind of both there, but I don't see a reason to move them below. Washington's catching up. They're catching up for sure, but below Washington, below Arizona, who kind of off a cold streak, even though they had a statement win there. I didn't see any reason there. Buccaneers at 12. Yeah, it's a much-needed win against the Vikings. They needed that. It's a good win. The defense, mainly a good win by the defense. They clutched up when the Vikings got in their territory. That's usually where the Vikings are really strong on offense. The Buccaneers they won that battle, so that's fantastic. So you almost do want to move them up for a win like that. Let's see them get consistent, though. Let's see them go on a streak. I want them to show the world that they mean business now, On top of that, it's tough to move them ahead of the other teams. So it's really not about them here. I do want to see them more consistent, but you'll see the teams, it's really tough to move them ahead of some of those teams. And I might surprise people here. The Seahawks actually moved down a spot. And they didn't move down a spot because they won, obviously. They won. They dominated the Jets. If they would have done that against a better team, it would have been very tough to move them down. More of a statement win, have been very tough to move them down. But I haven't really seen people, the first year I did my power rankings, a lot of people were really confused because this happens quite often. But it's not, you can't focus on the Seahawks. You have to focus on the other teams, So the Seahawks didn't move down a spot because they won, obviously. They moved down a spot because I had to move the Ravens up. The Ravens, I kind of called this. I kind of called going into the Cowboys game. They are going to get back on track on offense. I seen some offensive, the offensive line scheme block, the way they're blocking, some of the plays they're calling are similar to what dominated last year, more of just straightforward runs, power football, a lot of more man blocking. I kind of saw that coming in the Steelers game with their backups in. So I'm like, now's the time where they're going to pull this out when the starters come back. They did it against the Cowboys. They did it against the Browns, a hot Browns team, in a statement win. One of the best games, I think the best game of the year, maybe a unique game in NFL history, really. I mean, just a wild game, extremely entertaining. So that they had to move up, and and they're back on track, like I like it, like I predicted. And I think they're going to continue to climb, and it's very tough not moving them up more than one spot. That one spot, I wish it was more next to the Ravens, but it is extremely, extremely tough to move them. It's the other teams. It's the other in the 9 teams. It's tough to move those teams down, But I did think the Ravens were deserving of moving ahead of the Seahawks. The Seahawks, the Giants game is still right there on the resume. Recent. They are back on track after that Jets win. Big game against Washington, 11-14. That should be interesting. Ravens are back on track, and I think, based on what I expect from them, they'll continue to climb. But yeah, a team like the Colts, I know they beat the Colts head-to-head, but it's tough to move the Colts down. It's tough not to move the Colts up. Another one, I want to move the Ravens up more because where they're heading, they're on track to get back on track in a state win against the Browns. The Colts, I am extremely impressed with that offense. That Raiders game, that Colts-Raiders game was supposed to be I did pick the Colts, but somewhat of an even battle. Like, these are supposed to be two teams that are in the same boat, and what we learned from that game, they are not in the same boat. The Colts are the much, much better team, and I like that they're where their offense is going, because we have our doubts about their offense, and now we're starting to kind of get out of that. Now they're being more consistent. They're being more explosive, big play ability from them. Phillip Rivers is actually playing a lot better ball. Jonathan Taylor's playing better ball. So they look great. Their defense, a bunch of playmakers. Their defense, they may be. I think teams can get more yards and points on them compared to early in the year, because I think that just goes into watching the film and figure out ways to beat the defense. It's still a very good defense, but it's an offensive league, so your offense needs to improve as the year goes on. They're doing that, so I'm extremely impressed with the Colts. So you see where it's tough here. You want to move the Ravens up higher. You want to move the Colts up higher, but obviously you can't move the Ravens up ahead of the Colts based on what they just did. It's almost impossible to move them down. The Titans are at 8. It's tough to move the Colts out of the Titans too. The Titans did have that Browns loss recently in their resume. The Colts said the Titans lost. Titans dominated that game, I thought. But yeah, the Titans get a dominant win against the Jaguars. It's just tough to move them down. It is an explosive offense, one of the best in football, and that keeps them, in the top tier of teams. We'll see what they got against the Lions this week. There should be no problem, but you never know. Sometimes at the end of the year they have those weird games pop up, but they should win that game. 7, the Browns down 1 spot. And sometimes people can kind of look at the head-to-head. The Ravens are 2-0 against the Browns. They just beat the Browns, last night. So it's safe to say the Ravens head-to-head are better than the Browns. If they played a third time, that doesn't mean the Ravens are going to win for sure. Anybody can win is my point. But it is safe to say the Ravens are better than the Browns. But it's a 32-team power ranking. The Browns, we can't forget what they've done leading up to this point. They've been extra dominant. They beat the Titans in that statement win. They were on a streak. The Ravens are still kind of just getting out of that cold spot. Again, they're back on track. I think they're going to be even more, back on track, so they can continue to climb. But it was tough to move the Browns any further down in this. They put up a good fight against the Ravens there. Impressive offense for sure. The defense, lacking a little bit of speed. That's kind of their weakness. When they play speedy teams, that's kind of a problem. And they'll give up points. They'll give up yards. They rely on the big, turnovers, the big plays. So that's kind of their negative there. When you're going to go and play, the contenders, which they have the offensive formula to play with the contenders. When you play with the contenders, in the playoffs, down the stretch of the playoffs, those teams are there because a big reason they're there is because they take care of the ball and they make big plays while doing that. So when they can't take the ball away, how will they be? So that's kind of where my negative is with the Browns. But this offense is fun, man. It's explosive. It's you can know what's coming and you can't stop it. It's one of those situations. So they're at 7. Couldn't move them down any more than that. 6, the Steelers down 3 spots. Based on the way their offense is playing, I almost want to move them down further than that, but it's tough to do so. They are on a 2-game losing streak. They're still a good team, still one of the better, maybe the best defense in football. And they're fortunate they get to play the Bengals this week, so that could kind of get them out of that drought that they're in on offense, I suppose. And I think it helped if the Browns would have won. The Browns would have been ahead of the Steelers, no question. So that kind of helped them a bit. So they're down 3 spots to number 6. But, I mean, these teams are in the same area. I mean, you look down at the Seahawks, look down at the Ravens, the Colts. These teams are in the Titans, Browns. They're in the same boat, I think, along with these next couple teams as well. The Saints down 3 spots. A disappointing loss to the Eagles. I'm not really sure what to do with the Saints because it's a disappointing game. That's a disappointing game for them. It is one game. It could just be just an off day for the Saints, but there are days where they're a little similar to the Steelers. They got a really good defense. Sometimes they're off on offense. So how will they be against the better teams? How will they fare? Because we haven't seen them play too many of those. It's like the Saints and the Steelers. It's so hard to go on a streak like what they did, no matter who you play. So that's why they are still in the 5-6. They played some really good football that makes up most of the season, so they remain towards the top. But how will they be against the other good teams? The Saints got the Chiefs this week, so that's a true test. We will see there. They're down 3 spots. To number 5 after that loss. Almost came from behind and won the game to keep them up at number 2. That would have been something. 4 is the Rams, up 3 spots. The Rams, second half of the season, they've been good. Minus something with the Niners. They can't play the Niners. They can't play Shanahan. The past shows that. Minus that, they've been getting good. They got some big key wins. A statement win against the Patriots. We expect them to be the better team, but they dominate. This is looking like the best defense in football right now. The best defense. And they look like actually the most balanced team. We were calling the Steelers the most balanced team, and that was a big reason they were undefeated and they kind of got cold on offense. The Rams could be the most balanced team in football. It's debatable, but they look good. It's a dominant performance against the Patriots. And I mentioned it. I thought it was a similar matchup like the Niners, which is not a good matchup for the Rams. And they go out and they dominate the game. So they're looking good. I just want them to stay consistent. They're finally starting to do that. So where I can move them up to number 4, because earlier in the year it was kind of like, all right, super impressive, and they let us down. Super impressive, they let us down. Win, loss. Now they're being a little more consistent. I'm impressed. They're, again, extreme balance, great balance. We'll put you high in the power rankings. It will. So you're up 3 spots to number 4. We're on to the top 3, the big 3. We got the Green Bay Packers at number 2. The Packers, big win against the Lions. They didn't win by a big amount, but it's a good win against the Lions there. Staying consistent, offense staying consistent, putting up a lot of points. You see, it's one of the better offenses in football. At any given time, it could be the very best in football because they have a very balanced offense. The dominant run game, the dominant passing game, pass protection, run block, everything. Defense seems like it's getting a little better there. I expected the Lions to run a little more effective on the running games. The Packers' run defense it's pretty bad. That's kind of their only negative. But they held their own in this one. They did their job. It could be a little better, obviously, still, if you want to contend when it's all said and done. But it held their own, and they're starting to make more plays in the back end. Guys like Darnell Savage is really improving. They're starting to get more pressure again, though. See, Kenny Clark, I think he got a sack. I think Savage actually blitzed, got a sack. They're starting to get more pressure like last year. Last year they were ridiculous getting pressure. Maybe they're not quite there, but they're getting back on track at the right time of the season to kind of get back there. So Packers are definitely a top 3 team right now. The Buffalo Bills at number 2, up 2 spots. I don't know if it's weird seeing the Bills at number 2 because we knew, I was kind of high in the Bills. We knew they were going to be a good team, but number 2, it's what the Bills have done to get there. It's pretty impressive. It's a dominant win against the Steelers. They started off a little slow, but they end up dominating that game. The defense, I've been saying for weeks, it feels like it's improving. They started off a little slow, a little disappointing. they're getting going. They're playmakers out there, and the offense is it's always been really good. I think it's just more consistent right now. Josh Allen's playing great ball. Stephon Diggs playing great ball. I wish they can get more of a running game going, but it just shows how good they are, that they don't really have the strongest running game, and they're still dominating in the passing game through the air. Just big playability, explosive play after explosive play. They got some statement wins over the last several weeks. They're building up that resume. So they are the number 2 team right now. And the Chiefs remain at number 1. No reason to move them down. It's considered the best team in football. And they had a sloppy game against the Dolphins. They still won. It's a good Dolphins team. Turning the ball over 4 times is a negative, but when you turn the ball over 4 times, you lose the game. That's just how the NFL goes. But they won the game against a good team. So it's really the only team. I'm sure other teams could do it, but it's really the only team that you're kind of confident with that actually can have an off game and still win. That bad of a game. I mean, it wasn't that they had their big play still, but that many turnovers still win the game. So it's kind of just, even though it's kind of a negative way of talking about it and a negative point, it's positive at the same time because, showing that they can overcome that and still win that just shows how good of a team they are. So the Chiefs are still number 1. So we see some big changes there. The Bills and the Packers. Yeah, there was no question about the top 3. Those are the top 3 teams there. But that doesn't mean the other teams can't, play up to their ability. It can beat them. That doesn't mean that, But the top 3, I didn't really have to think too hard about that, them being the top 3 teams. But Rams are playing some good ball. The Saints are only 1 game, but they're heading in, the other direction. Obviously, the Steelers 2 games now heading in the wrong direction. The Browns lost, but I'm still extremely impressed with them. Titans, Colts, 2 AFC South teams. The Titans, I think, they're up here because they have one of the best offenses in football. You can't, no longer can game plan for just Derrick Henry, and that's what makes them good. The Colts, I'm impressed with the Colts. That offense, it's getting good, and that's what they needed. That's what they needed there. The Ravens back on track, like I said. So a lot of teams impressing. A lot of teams impressing right now. We'll see what happens this week and how things can shift going into Week 16. We're getting towards the end. We're getting towards playoff time. I can't wait for that. We'll have you covered, of course, for every single game all week. For the rest of the regular season and the playoffs, of course. So smash that like button, subscribe, turn notifications on, and so you don't miss a thing, and follow our Twitter. That'd be very important. Appreciate the support. Thanks, everyone, for watching this week's Power Rankings video. That's going to do it. Goodbye.